This is the new 2026 Honda Prelude, and it's almost so good. This is an attractive car. It's a beautiful design, like the Prelude from the 1990s was. It's based on the beloved modern Honda Civic, and it has suspension stuff and brakes from the wonderful Civic Type R. Unfortunately, it's also radically overpriced for what it is. Honda screwed this one up, and today I'm going to review this car, explain it all, and show you its quirks and features.
Every January, I go into full clean-out mode. Closets, junk drawers, the pantry, all of it gets reset. And a few years ago, I realized my digital life needed the same treatment. That's when I started using DeleteMe, and I've stuck with it. Your name, address, phone number, all that ends up on data broker sites. These are companies that collect and sell your personal info to basically anybody who wants to buy it, including scammers. DeleteMe goes out and removes that information for you. I like it because it's not a one-time thing. It's ongoing. They keep checking, keep removing, and keep your info from creeping back online while you move on with your life. So, if you're already decluttering your home this January, treat your privacy the same way. Clean out the digital junk too. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for DeleteMe. Now, at a special discount for my audience. Today, get 20% off your DeleteMe plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/demuro and use promo code DEMURO at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/demuro and use code DEMURO at checkout.
All right, time for the quirks and features of the new Prelude. This is going to be fun. Let's start, though, with some basics. So the Prelude first came out in the late 1970s, amazingly, and it was sold all the way through 2001 in 5 different generations. And then it was canceled. The sort of the market interest moved away from smaller, compact front-wheel drive coupes. The Prelude was gone, but now it's back, resurrected for 2026, and I must say, it's beautiful. This is the best looking Prelude yet. It is absolutely gorgeous. This new Prelude is based on the Honda Civic, but you wouldn't really be able to tell. It's a nice looking car, well proportioned, well designed, well styled and executed. It just really looks good. And it has some cool stuff from the Honda Civic Type R, which is the ultimate Honda performance car right now. Specifically, it has Civic Type R brakes, which is a pretty cool thing, and it has Civic Type R suspension, which is an especially cool thing that should radically benefit this car's handling. Unfortunately, you don't get the Civic Type R engine. Even though this is the sporty new Honda resurrecting the Prelude with the Civic Type R suspension and brakes, they've given it the engine from the Civic Hybrid. Now, I personally love the Honda Civic Hybrid. I actually think it's one of the best overall cars on sale today. In any segment, in any class, it is fantastic, but it is not what I would really consider to be a performance car. It's relatively quick for what it is, but it's not like fun and exciting and thrilling. And so when you put its engine into the Prelude, you get the great benefit of the Civic Hybrid, which is efficiency. This car gets 44 miles per gallon in combined city and highway driving, which is fantastic. But unfortunately, you also get the Civic Hybrid's other attributes, which is only 200 horsepower, only front-wheel drive, and only offered with an automatic transmission. Those are great features in the Civic Hybrid, but in the sporty, exciting Prelude, they're drawbacks. But they're not the biggest drawback. In fact, the powertrain isn't really so bad. The Civic Hybrid does 0 to 60 in the 6-ish second range, 6.5, which is relatively fine. And you could handle that power and acceleration if this car was at a relatively affordable price point. Not that fast, not that expensive. It makes sense. Only the problem is this car is not that fast and actually quite expensive. The sticker price for a new Prelude is $43,200, including destination, which is massive money for what this car is, and especially expensive for what this car is when you compare it against rivals. Shall we give some examples? The new Nissan Z starts at $44,000 with 400 horsepower. That's double. The Ford Mustang starts at $35,000 with 315 horsepower. That's $8,000 less and a lot more power. The Subaru BRZ starts at $37,000 with rear-wheel drive, a manual transmission, and 30 more horsepower. Even the BRZ has more power, which is amazing because the BRZ has never had more power than anything. The Mazda Miata starts at $31,000. It's got less power than this car, but it's still faster, and it's rear-wheel drive, manual transmission, and a convertible. And did I mention $31,000? The Toyota GR Corolla is $3,000 cheaper than this. It has 100 more horsepower, all-wheel drive, and a whole hatchback rear door situation. A certified pre-owned version of Honda's own Civic Type R costs the same as this, or less. You get way more power, the same suspension, and the whole hatchback practicality situation. Even the BMW 230i, which is a BMW, has the same starting price as this car with 55 more horsepower. When is a BMW ever a better value than a Honda? Now, when Honda brought me this car to review, they brought it down and discussed it with me, and we spent about 15 minutes talking just about the pricing, and they made 2 points that I will now share with you. One of them I think is pretty reasonable, and that is this car is partially more expensive because it is only offered in one fairly well-equipped trim level. Honda says they obviously could have gotten a cheaper Prelude if they had taken some of the content and features out of this car. There could have been two versions, one with a lower starting price, probably into the 30s. But because Honda has always known that this was going to be kind of a niche, low volume, low production car, it just didn't make sense from a production standpoint to create two versions. So there's only one, and it's expensive, but it's also got a lot of stuff. And of course, the comparisons I just made are this car, relatively well equipped, against very base models of rivals. However, even when you factor all of that stuff in, this car is still not exactly a good value proposition, which leads me to the second point that Honda made, and that is it's not really comparable to those vehicles. Honda's point was that this isn't intended to be a all-out sports car rival to the Mustang or the GR86 or the GR Corolla or the BRZ or the Miata. Instead, this is more of a luxury GT kind of cruiser with its beautiful styling, automatic transmission, a lot of equipment. This is supposed to be like the car for someone who maybe wants a BRZ, but they don't want something quite so frenetic and high-strung and twitchy. They want something beautiful and sporty, but more relaxed. Which is an interesting point that I hadn't considered. And as I thought about it, it dawned on me. A luxury, compact, attractive, hybrid, sporty coupe. Where have I heard of that before? Ah, yes, the Cadillac ELR, a well-known sales success in the luxury, compact, hybrid, sporty, beautiful styling realm. Actually, I think Honda's point is reasonable. There probably is a market for people who want kind of a beautiful, sporty-looking car, but without some of the drawbacks that come with an actual sporty car. Unfortunately, I think the total number of people in that market is approximately 7. And 6 of them are going to buy the BMW 230i. So, well, we've established that this is a beautiful car reviving a beloved nameplate, but in a rather difficult value proposition. What about the rest of the quirks and features? Well, let's start in the back where you have the Honda script. Not the Honda H logo, but the actual Honda brand name written out here. The first time this has happened on a non-EV. And Honda tells me the Honda writing will proliferate on other models in the future. Now below that, you also have Prelude written out in a font and location that is suspiciously similar to Porsche. However, Honda told me, and I verified, that this is actually an old school Prelude font that was used on old Prelude models 40 plus years ago. It's not just them copying Porsche, although the placement in this exact spot seems a little bit suspect. But that's where this comes from. Now, you will also notice back here there is a little blue trim piece sticking out from below the license plate. That has no function, but the blue on that trim piece is repeated several other times throughout the car. Take a look, for instance, at the brakes. You can see on the caliper you have that same color blue, and written out is Prelude in the same font that you see on the back. Again, these are Civic Type R brakes, but obviously the caliper changed to say Prelude. In the front, you also have another one of these little vertical blue lines, a little trim piece just like you do in back, to again give you a pop of that blue color that's sort of distinctive to the Prelude. You'll see it in more places when we get inside, but before that, let's talk through some other exterior quirks. Starting with the door handles. They are flush with the body, as you can see. These are the first flush door handles ever installed on a Honda sold here in North America. They also did flush door handles on the Honda E, that little compact city car, which just seems awesome, but we didn't get that in the States, so this is a first. I also really like the look of the rear lighting situation. You can see this rear light bar that goes across the whole car, very thin strip horizontal, and when you put on the turn signal, it mirrors that, another thin horizontal strip that looks great. I genuinely think the rear of this car looks nice, and in fact, the whole car looks nice. I really think this is an attractive, well-designed, well-proportioned car, like I said before. And that's true of the interior too. This is a really nice place to be, starting with the seats, which look and feel fantastic. You can see this two-tone leather, which is very nice. It's a very attractive seat, and it feels good to touch, to sit on, etc. You also have this houndstooth perforation pattern, which Honda told me is actually a callback to the Honda City Cabriolet from like the 1980s, the same houndstooth pattern. Now it's repeated here on these seats. There's also a little hidden Easter egg on the seats. If you go to the driver's side, this little button snap loop that keeps the seatbelt in place, you open that up and you can see a little silhouette of the Prelude kind of printed into the leather here. And you will notice there is a similar Prelude silhouette on the windshield, which is kind of cool. But even more interesting, over on the passenger side, you open up the same thing and you can see numbers. Not just random numbers, of course, but the actual exact date that the original Prelude was launched in Japan back in the 1970s. November 25 of 78 is imprinted on this little part here. You'll probably never notice this, but if you do, that's what it's for. By the way, speaking of differences between the driver and passenger seat, how about this? The passenger seat is less bolstered than the driver's seat. The driver's seat has thicker bolsters, whereas the passenger seat is designed more for a little comfort. They figure the driver will drive this thing solo in the canyons and have fun and need the bolsters. The passenger probably wants a little more comfort when the car is used more around town. Kind of interesting. Another interesting thing is that the seats in this car are manually adjustable. It doesn't have power seats, which is kind of a surprise at this high price point. No power seats in this car. There are a few surprises like this that are still coming. We'll get to them, but for now, let's stay on the quirks. Starting with the stitching. You can see the seats have this blue stitching kind of on the outside, which is intended to match that blue color that I showed you on the brake caliper and those other trim pieces. You also have this blue stitching in other places, like the center console. You can see all around the center storage lid, the dashboard, and the steering wheel, all of that blue stitching, which is a distinctive kind of unique Prelude color. And since we're exploring the rest of the interior, let's talk generally. I gotta say, this is a pretty nice place to be. It's a nice, well laid out, high quality interior. Everything feels nice, looks good, it's intuitive where it's placed. It all works well. Function and attractiveness, however, it also works pretty well in the Honda Civic, which has a very similar interior to this car. Now, admittedly, that would be the highest form of the Civic, which in the hybrid is the Civic Touring Hybrid, and that version is about $10,000 cheaper than this car. So while this is a nice interior, you can get it for a lot less money in the Civic if you so choose. Now, admittedly, there are some kind of distinctive, unique things to the Prelude, like, for instance, this suede trim over on the passenger side of the dashboard looks nice, with Prelude stitched in, as you can see. You also have a distinctive steering wheel in the Prelude, not shared with the Civic, and it even has a little strip at the top to let you know when you're on center, in case you're doing hard laps in your Prelude on the racetrack, you're going hand over hand, and you're trying to find that middle position. And another interesting upgrade you get over the Civic is this giant button in the center that says S+. Interestingly, this isn't a drive mode like a Sport Plus. Instead, you press that and it turns on simulated shifting for this car, which doesn't have a traditional transmission with gears. Now, you can turn on S+ in any drive mode. So Comfort, GT, or Sport, those are your drive modes, and you can have the shifting in any of them. And honestly, it works fantastically. I've turned this on and it's lovely. It simulates shifting perfectly. It works really well. Feels like you're driving like a sporty performance car with shifting, and they've even engineered in rev matching and some shift shocks, so you really actually feel shifts, which is pretty cool. The S+ button also will turn the regen gauge and the gauge cluster into a tachometer that matches the shifting, which is pretty cool. And a little hidden Easter egg, if you press and hold down the S+ button, it both turns on S+ and it instantly puts you in individual mode, which is sort of like your custom setup drive mode. So it's like a shortcut to get into your drive mode with S+ on. And honestly, it's a pretty cool feature you can't get in the Civic. And other interesting interior quirks. I've always loved the climate control vents in the latest Civic, carried on into the Prelude, this sort of mesh pattern, as you can see, and then this toggle switch kind of sticking out. It makes the whole thing look good, and it feels pretty nice to adjust. I also like the infotainment system. It's fairly basic and simple, but that's all you're really looking for in these cars, since most people are using Apple CarPlay and Android Auto these days. But it's still good, well-positioned, responsive to your touch, and it has built-in Google, so Google Assistant, Google Maps, etc. The only drawback of this infotainment system, if you're not using Android Auto or CarPlay, is that the home screen could be better. It'd be nice to see an actual home screen that shows like a map and the music and maybe your phone connection or something, instead of no real home screen where you have to go between those items if you want to see what they all display. That's especially important in this car because the gauge cluster screen setup is just really not all that good. Even though there is a full screen gauge cluster, it is shocking how unconfigurable it is compared to rivals. In other cars, you can put on a full screen map and you can have a map showing with your music playing and all this stuff. Here, you can only really adjust the right pot of the gauge cluster. You can't change it to a full screen anything, map or music or whatever, and you can't do as much adjustment as you really can in a lot of rivals. I don't really understand the point of doing a digital gauge cluster screen and making it so non-adjustable, but that is Honda's current tech, and it's a little bit disappointing. Also a little bit disappointing in this car is you have heated seats, but you do not have ventilated seats, no cooled seats, and you don't have a heated steering wheel. That's in addition to no power seats. You also don't have a power sunroof, no sunroof at all. In fact, Honda tells me this is the first Prelude that has ever been offered with no sunroof. And all of these things are a bit of a surprise considering, like I said, this is a pretty high price point to be cheaping out on some features. But the biggest cheap out of all is undoubtedly the back seats. You fold the front seat forward, you get into the back, and you can see the back is a cloth seat that doesn't match the front leather seats in material or even in color. No matter what color you get the front seats, the back seat is black cloth, not matching. They've decontented the back seat and cheaped out back here in order to save money on this unbelievably expensive car that they're trying to pitch as a luxury GT kind of rival to cars that don't even do that level of cheaping out. Having a separate, cheaper back seat than the front is some real Dodge neon kind of stuff. And it really is jarring when you fold forward this attractive, high-quality, well-designed front seat and you see what they've decided to stick rear passengers with. It's jarring to imagine, particularly considering so much criticism this car has been it's too expensive. Well, here it is, cheaping out on the rear seats and a few other features throughout the car. It's shocking. So the question then is, how did it get so expensive? And one thing Honda explained to to me is, again, this was always intended to be a niche product. They were never thinking this would have some wild sales success and hit huge numbers. It was always going to be a pretty bespoke car for a relatively small amount of people, and as a result, it was pretty expensive to create the Prelude, and so they didn't really have the ability to make it a lot cheaper because they're not going to get big volume in sales. And that meant, even at this price point, cheaping out on some stuff like the cloth back seats. Plus, they know you're never going to use the back seats anyway. But you will use the cargo area. And another surprise is that this car doesn't have a power tailgate for $44,000. It is completely manual. You're lifting it up yourself, opening and closing. Not a huge deal, but at this price point, you almost never see that. Now, a tailgate is an interesting feature in a Prelude. In fact, Honda told me that every single previous Prelude has had a traditional trunk up until now. Finally, a coupe with a hatchback, like so many other coupes, especially Japanese ones, are a real open hatchback here. And there's pretty good cargo space, as you can see. Reasonable practicality in the cargo area, and of course, you can always fold down those cheap-looking back seats in case you want even more practicality for larger items. There's also a little extra storage under the floor, although as you can see, it's not much. It would be for kind of flat stuff, maybe a computer or an iPad if you don't want it rolling around in the cargo area. And you can also use the cargo floor. You can fold it up and use it as a divider, so you can keep some cargo in front, some cargo in back, in case you're carrying a load of bowling balls and milk cartons. You want to keep them separate, and you can do that in your Prelude. Unfortunately, the rather excellent practicality of this car still doesn't justify the price point. And by the way, one other note on practicality, it's actually especially impressive because this car is relatively small. In fact, this new Prelude is almost the exact same length as the old Prelude, which went out of production in 2001. In this age of all cars getting bigger and giant, the Prelude certainly has not increased in size, although it is 4 inches wider in order to accommodate the Civic Type R suspension and the track. Now, unfortunately, they haven't increased the size, but they also haven't increased the power. The old Prelude from 2001 maxed out at 200 horses, exact same as this car. But when I pointed that out to Honda, they reminded me that this car hasn't really gained much in weight. This is only about 250 pounds heavier than that old Prelude, and obviously vast improvements in suspension since then. It represents about an 8% increase in curb weight compared to rivals, which are all between 10 and 20% curb weight increases, except of course for the freakishly small Miata. So while rivals have grown bigger, fatter, wider, this car has stayed relatively the same size. It's just a shame it's also stayed the same power. But that's a lot of talk about the new Prelude. Obviously very interested to get behind the wheel and see how it drives, so let's do it. All right, driving the new Prelude. Ah, yes. I want to get something out of the way right away in this drive video. The popular opinion of this car is that it sucks. It does not suck. This is not a bad car. It's just bad for its price point. And I've spent some time with this car now, and I've realized that it is not a bad car. The Civic Type R suspension components actually create a pretty nice driving experience. This car corners well. It feels stable when it corners. For a front-wheel drive car, this is a sharp handling, it's kind of solid feeling, stable car. It has good steering feel. It has good steering feedback, and it's reasonably spry and zippy around corners. It also accelerates well. There's been talk that it accelerates 0 to 60 in around 8 seconds. I don't think that's going to tease out. As more people get the chance to test this car, I don't have instruments for instrumented testing, but my guess is that it's going to be closer to what the Civic Hybrid is, which makes sense. It's based on that. It's probably somewhere in the 6s, and it feels faster than 8 seconds 0 to 60. There's no doubt in my mind it feels faster than that. It's also a pretty nice car. I mean, the interior is fairly nice. The seats are good. They're nicely bolstered. The materials in here are good. The tech is good. I mean, I've already said this, but I think the design is really attractive. I think it's a nice looking car. It's far more better of an effort to make a coupe than just the regular Civic coupes over the years. There's a lot of good stuff about this car. It's just that when you start to actually compare it against rivals at the price point, that's where it falls apart. Okay, so it handles well. It does. But when you compare it to a BRZ, It handles well for a front-wheel drive car. It handles well for a $33,000 car. Next to a BRZ, which handles really well, then the price comparison, okay, we have a problem. The acceleration, it's not that slow. It really isn't. It's not that slow. But when you compare it to $44,000 cars, it's slow. 0 to 60 and whatever this ends up being, high sixes, not so bad for a Civic-based hybrid car. It's actually pretty good. 0 to 60 for a $44,000 car is where you run into the problem. And that continues on with like the interior and the tech, etc. Like, all of this stuff is good and would have been good at $36,000. Like, basically where the BRZ is. You have sort of a more luxurious alternative to a BRZ. And I think that's a pretty reasonable proposition. There's people who get in the BRZ and say, I don't really want the freneticness of this car, but I do want something that is a coupe and looks cool, and, you know, my kids are out of the house, or I never had kids, or whatever. Like, I want a sort of a sporty car, not just a Corolla, but something sporty. I think you can justify this at $36,000. And I think we're at $44,000, that becomes a much harder proposition, including against vehicles in Honda's own excellent lineup. If I was spending $44,000 and was just dead set on a Honda, it wouldn't even be a choice. I would get a certified pre-owned Integra Type S. That's the car. I love that car. I think it looks good, better than this. It's more practical than this. It's faster than this. It's just as smooth. It drives just as well. I truly see no drawbacks to that, except that it's used. But Honda's got a great CPO, and it's not very used. We're talking about a year or two old with maybe 20,000 miles. That's the car to buy. Now, those are manual only. And so, you know, if you want an automatic, there are other options you could consider, including a Civic Hybrid Touring. But I think Honda's point is there's nothing really quite at this juncture of car. This sort of luxury but economy, coupe but not sporty. And my argument in return would be there's nothing in that segment because there are no buyers there, which, as I mentioned before, the Cadillac ELR has already showed that. It already solved this question for us. Nonetheless, I do truly legitimately think this is a pretty nice car, and I actually think that on the used market, these may not end up being such bad vehicles. This may not end up being such a bad value proposition. My guess is these will not sell well. They'll be pretty discounted by dealers, which will result in fairly reasonable used pricing, especially for a Honda. And I think the used market will probably settle this about where it should be, which is maybe only a few $1,000s more than a Civic Hybrid from this era. And I think this car starting to get priced at $30,000 to $35,000 on the used market starts to become a more appealing proposition if you're not looking for outright sportiness where you would get a BRZ or a Miata or a Mustang or something like that. So overall, again, nice car, drives well. I honestly enjoy driving it. I will say that the Honda saying that this isn't a CVT may be true, but it certainly functions and behaves like one. It's cool to be able to put it in the S Plus mode and get shifts out of it. Like, they've solved for some of the problems that I think you would have with this car. It really is a nice driving, good, well-executed car. It's just too expensive. The complaints I have about this car do not relate to sitting in this seat. They really, really don't. They only relate to sitting in this seat and checking your bank account. And if you do that, it just starts to become a little bit less desirable of a proposition, which is a shame because I think they've actually executed bringing this car back pretty well, except for that little tiny little issue, the price. And so that's the new 2026 Honda Prelude. I like this car. I think it looks great. It's attractive. It's got a nice interior, good tech. It drives well. It's efficient. It's just not good enough for the price point. I would buy basically every single rival of this car before I bought this car. It's a rare misstep from Honda, the new Prelude. It's good, but simply overpriced. And now it's time to give this car a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 50 out of 100. This is an interesting one for sure. I actually liked the new Prelude. I like how it looks, and I enjoyed driving it. And in a vacuum with no rivals and no knowledge of the price point, I would say it's a pretty appealing car. Two things really kill it. One, it's underpowered, and so it's clearly not a sports car, meaning it'll never be as fun as a GR86 or a Miata or a Mustang or a Nissan Z. Front-wheel drive, automatic only, 200 horsepower, that just doesn't do it. But that would be fine
if it weren't so expensive, which is the big problem. I do agree with Honda's contention that they've created something that doesn't exist, an attractive sporty coupe that's a bit more luxury cruiser than frenetic sports car. There's a market for that, but not a big one, and I think Prelude will struggle to find any buyers after the first few months on the market.